today is going to come from Matthew, the 13th chapter, and we'll be starting with verse 1. It's one we know. It's called the parable of the sower. We all know that one. And it's an unusual parable because it's in two parts. After this parable, the disciples go, "Why do you speak to them in parables? So, why do you do that?" You know, and that's sounds hard for us to understand because parables are the easiest to understand. They're simple stories that you understand with a spiritual application. And so when they said that, every time I read that, I went, I don't understand. I don't. But if you notice, this parable is in two parts. Most of the other parables are something like, the kingdom of heaven is like. He gives you the code. See, to understand a parable, you have to understand what the things in the parable are referring to. Well, he gave this parable and didn't give the code. Because if they wanted to learn, they would ask. But they didn't. And the disciples go, "Why are you doing that? It's confusing them." You know, because sometimes there are people that will never understand. Doesn't matter what you do. So then he tells them. But I want to read the parable first, and then we'll go to get the code. And this particular parable is so unique because when it's first given, there's no code. It's just a story. It's a story that everybody in the first century could understand. It made absolute sense. It was just a statement of fact. Absolute. We start with verse 3. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "A sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on the rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear." He's telling them, now this is important. You got ears, use them. Well, I don't understand. Well, then you should ask to figure out what it is. And now the thing is that when he gives the parable the first time, there's not a single explanation. Then he tells his disciples every single thing that's important. He gives them the entire code. This is the most explained of any of the parables. The one he gives next, the parable of the weeds or the parable of the darnel, he gives a little bit, but he doesn't cover every single thing. But the key is, he always tells you everything that's important. With this one, everything is important. Hear then the parable of the sower. This is verse 18. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. He explains that the seed is the Word of God. And now he's going to explain the ground. Now, one of the keys to truly understanding a parable is understanding what it says and what it doesn't say. Doesn't say how much rain there was. Doesn't say if there had been any fertilizer dropped along the path too. Doesn't say anything about any of that. It's talking only about the seed and the soil. That's it. And that's one of the important things about parables, is not taking them to mean something that they're not meant to mean. What's important was the soil. They don't understand it. They don't get it. The evil one comes and snatches it away. And you're going to find that. You're going to find that sometimes the ground is not suited. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and then when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. They look good. They spring up. It looks good. Because the thing is you can tell in this parable, we see that he uses the path and the rocky ground. But the fact is, since we can't see the heart, we can't see that it's rocky ground or that it's a path. It's just people. The only way you can tell it's the path is that it just passes them by. They don't get it. You ever done that? You talk to somebody, you explain it just as clearly as possible, and whoosh, it goes over their heads. It's not that you use highfalutin words. It's not that there's just no way for it to get into the heart. It's just not, the ground is not ready. It's not. And other times, and believe you me, this is what drives preachers crazy. The seed is sown, and it springs up. It's there, and it is just beautiful. It's just wonderful. You don't have to beg them to come to Wednesday night class. You don't have to do it. They are just on fire for Jesus. And then What it is different for everybody. Maybe it means Sister Bertha knows better than you. And she says something that hurts him. Maybe the preacher says something that's just a little bit harsh. Maybe he meant it in a good way, but maybe he didn't get taken that way. Oh, that never happens. And sometimes the preacher or somebody in the congregation is just too impatient to teach gently and says something that they're not ready to hear yet. And it hurts them. Or maybe their child dies. Or maybe the things are immense. The things that it can be. But they don't have any root in themselves. It's not that the ground is hard, it's that it's shallow. There's no place for the root. What's kept them going is the enthusiasm, the excitement. Their brothers and sisters. The root isn't in themselves. The roots are in other people and other things. So when the going gets rough, gone. Just like that. And when we talk about this, everybody goes, yeah, I know those new Christians. I've known somebody like that. There are some preachers and elders and Bible school teachers who have thin soil. And they are good for 30 years. But then something happens. And they don't have a root in themselves. The Word of God has not sunk deep enough into their heart, into their core, into their being, that they're rooted. They have to depend upon other things. And when those other things aren't strong enough, they're gone. This sort of goes into the next parable. But you can't tell from the outside what kind of soil is on the inside. You can't tell until harvest time. You really can't. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately falls away. For what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. He hears it. It takes root. It starts to grow. But it's choked out. That, I believe, is a picture of the world today. That's a picture of our young people. That's a picture of our middle-aged and our old. The word's there. They know the truth. It's been doing good. It does some of that. But slowly, it's choked out. Even kudzu doesn't choke it out in a day. It goes fast, but not that fast. just slowly the cares and the good things of the world come in, and they just slowly start choking it out. That's the soil that's in the thorns. Now, since we're not actual dirt, we can get out of the thorns. Dirt can't move. People can. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, in another 30. The good soil lasts until harvest. The others are all there. They just don't last long enough. You have to ask yourself, am I good soil? But the thing that to me just is so wonderful of Jesus Jesus doesn't say there's good soil, there's better soil, and there's best soil. He said this is a good soil. And the good soil bears fruit. In one case, 100-fold. In one case, 60. And in another, 30. He didn't rank the soil. There's the path, rocky, thorny, and there's good. There's no better and best. They're just good. Sometimes the good soil does 100-fold. Sometimes it's only 30. But as far as Jesus is concerned, it's all the same. I think that's a part of the parable that we miss. You know, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that this person produces such a harvest, and my harvest is just not that good. God says what matters is the soil, and if you make it to harvest, you're good soil. And that's enough. That is enough. And that's the thing that I want you to gain from this parable is if you make it to the end, that's enough. Will it be easy? Because the fact is, there's a whole lot of things that this parable doesn't talk about. Doesn't talk about drought. Doesn't talk about floods. Doesn't talk about fertilizing the soil. Because you know that path can be made good. All it talks about is the soil. The only person that is responsible for the soil is you. Do you want to be good soil? Do you want to get rid of the thorns? Do you want to take care of that? That is the thing. And understand that as Christians, we sow the seed. But you can sow the seed, and sow the seed, and sow the seed. But if it's all the path, you're not going to get any harvest. You can sow the seed and be in the rocky ground. You can sow it and be in the thorny, because you can't tell. Have you ever been doing personal work and you find somebody that you're just certain, you can see it in their eyes, you can see that they're good, and zip, nothing. And you go, what happened? What happened? I don't get it. It's not you, and it's not the seed. The soil wasn't right. Don't give up sowing because the ground isn't right. Just keep on sowing, because you can't tell what good ground is. And I've got a great example for that. I tried to grow mustard greens, and I prepared the soil. I had the garden. It was perfect. Not a one of them came up. Next spring, I looked out, and all the way out to my garden is mustard greens. You can see where it fell from the thing I had it in. The seeds were scattered behind, and they grew up. I thought the soil in the garden was the good soil. It wasn't. That lesson is sow the seed. Sow the seed. Sow the seed. If anybody needs to answer the invitation